Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Orange County Funding Corp. Meeting of the Governance Committee. We have a agenda before us. I'd like to call that meeting to order. Ask Bill to do the roll call, please.
Sure. Jeffrey Christ.
Here.
Dean Tamburri.
Here.
Dr. Vincent Odock.
Yes.
Giovanni Palladino.
Present.
All four committee members are here.
Okay, thank you. And we have proof of notice of the meeting here. And we'll move on to review of the minutes from our December 19th, 2023 Governance Committee meeting for the Funding Court. Any additions, corrections, comments on those minutes? They talked about the committee assignments. And I believe reviewed the annual reports, project updates. Would anyone care to make a
I'll make a
motion
motion
to
to approve.
accept?
Yep.
Approve. Thank you.
I'll second.
Giovanni, second by Dean. Any other discussion on those minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Is there any other business to come before this governance committee for today's meeting? I'm not aware of any, Bill.
No, sir.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn the governance committee meeting for the funding court.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Dean, second by Doc Odock. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried, meeting adjourned.
Very
Thank you.
efficient meeting. Well done.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Orange County IDA meeting of the Governance Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Bill to do the roll call, please.
Yes, Jeffrey Christ.
Here.
Dean Tamburri.
Here.
Dr. Vincent Odock.
Yes.
Giovanni Palladino.
Present.
All four members are present.
And you are Bill Fioravanti, our president and CEO.
I am, and Mr. Jose Rojas is here
Yes.
handling AV for us.
Beautiful. We have proof of notice for the meeting in our packet. And I'd like to move on to review of the minutes for the Governance Committee meeting from December 19th. Members have a copy of those minutes. Any comments, additions, corrections? And if none, I'd entertain a motion to accept those
I'll make a
minutes.
motion.
By Giovanni, second by Doc Odock. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. I'm in favor as well. Motion carried. Committee responsibilities, I thought with a new year on us, new on the board, and especially this committee, I would just ask Bill to review our responsibilities as the governance committee.
Yes,
Bill.
thank you. Yes, out of the Public Authorities Act, Section 2824, this is how we know as an IDA that we must have governance, finance, and audit committees. So we have those. We have a couple extras, including, say, Accelerator, for example. Those are the ones we must have. And the PAAA does spell out exactly what those responsibilities are for each. So just for the governance committee, we'll cover it this evening, and I'll read it right from the Section 2824. The governance committee shall be comprised of not less than 3 independent members who shall possess the necessary skills to understand the duties and functions of the governance committee. It shall be the responsibility of the governance committee to keep the board informed of current best governance practices, to review corporate governance trends, to recommend updates to the authority's corporate governance principles, to advise appointing authorities on the skills and experiences required of potential board members, to examine ethical and conflict of interest issues, to perform board self-evaluations, and to recommend bylaws which include rules and procedures for conduct of board business. Those are the governance committee responsibilities.
Thank you. Very helpful, Bill. I think reasonably broad, and my thought process is things we could complement, work for the board, and recommendations. I welcome anybody to bring those things up. We do have several things on our agenda today related to that. Any thoughts, questions on that governance committee responsibility as described by Bill and the section 2824 of the PAA? What's the PAA?
The public authority, I think she's missing an A on there.
Oh.
The public authority, what is It's the name of the law.
Okay, sorry about
Of which
that.
we're gonna
I got
govern
the
under.
drift. I just wanted to have some
Sure.
sense on what it was about. Okay,
Public Authorities Accountability Act of
Oh, okay.
2005, yes.
got it.
I can't be there.
Thank you. Moving on to the policy review. We have two we wanted to discuss a bit tonight. And again, I'd ask Bill to bring us up to speed on his thoughts and decisions to consider.
Sure, yes, thank you. There really are two policies that I'd like to focus on, one being much more involved than the other. Our UTEP, Uniform Tax Exemption Policy, which I'll remind everyone at home is something that's required of all IDAs. It really puts into writing what our priorities are, what our areas of focus are, the types of businesses and industry sectors we're looking to attract, and therefore it spells out the incentives that we would give those different sectors or classifications, always with the opportunity, of course, to deviate from that, but with the UTEP, it's really supposed to drive most of your incentive decision-making. So the UTEP was last reviewed and revised in 2019. I will say that I believe that current administration, which we now know in hindsight, included, really bad actors. And they made some, in my opinion, some revisions to the UTEP that were done really to please elected officials and some others. And the way I look at it now is that was purely as a misdirection, so they didn't look at the malfeasance that was going on at the accelerator. Because I do like to tell people publicly all the time that even those bad actors, they didn't do anything wrong with the IDA, frankly. They were doing everything properly, following all the rules, trying to be better at that. And again, changing the UTEP to appease people, but that part I believe was really to kind of get the attention away from where they were doing their wrongdoing. So there are some things, changes they made I'd like to discuss, but mostly I want to focus on what are the sectors that we want to prioritize here. And I spelled out my initial thoughts, but this needs to be board driven as well, so I wanted to share those with you, and we don't have to have all the answers tonight, but I'd like you to think about it and tell me if you agree with these and if there's something that's missing, and then just a few other considerations. If I can go through this now.
Yeah,
This
quick
is the sheet
question.
here, yeah.
So this is the current policy
Yes, you have that
without
in the
revision?
packet. Correct,
Okay.
yes.
It does say something about this policy from 2019 replaced the one that was in place previous from 2012.
Correct.
Got it, okay,
Exactly.
yep.
So this sheet, Jeff, you have it handy? I got another one.
I got it right here.
Okay, good. Dr.
Yep.
Rodak, you have it, UTEP revision? So that, I remember when I read the governance responsibilities, that's what's in your right hand, except it's in microscopic text font size, but you have it. I made it larger for Jeff, which let me just print this out for you guys, so you have something to read.
I can read that.
Okay, all right.
But do you want, is this the entire UTEP? Is this?
It is.
It is, okay.
Yes, because that has the scoring sheet at the end.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly.
Yes, it's in there.
In the
just,
IDA packet.
It just doesn't say UTEP is spelled
Yeah,
out.
it's in yours.
Uniform.
I don't have that, but what's the sheet here?
Oh, I'm sorry.
To your right.
That one, okay, it's okay.
My peripheral vision's.
That's all right. That's okay. Fair enough.
I have the same problem, don't worry about it.
No, where is this, in this package, the uniform?
Yes.
And,
That's right.
Yeah.
we also talked about, changing this prior
Here.
to, but I think minor
starts on
Oh, yeah, that's part of the
page.
conversation.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
then it goes into
And
these,
to do this.
schedules.
sidetrack, but
those
if this
revisions
changes,
are
this is all
summarized
larger,
on that, suggested talking points at least on that page.
Notification.
We need a public hearing and everything for
I
this.
just wanna make
For
sure.
discussion.
I just want to get ahead of it, I don't want to wait
Yep.
for monitors,
No
so.
problem. All right, I think we're organized, Bill.
Okay, great, all right. So, looking at this sheet, that at the top says 2024 UTEP revisions. This is again, just the starting point for us,
And this is for discussion.
for discussion.
Yeah.
Correct. So, top priorities. I think you've all heard me talk enough about high-tech projects, and Jeff and I heard plenty of it this week at the New York State EDC conference. It's certainly the focus of New York State. The opportunity is enormous for us to continue to thrive in a global competition for chip manufacturing and the supply chain that comes down from that as well. So these are my thoughts on it: semiconductor-related supply chain, clean tech, advanced manufacturing, advanced agriculture, anything of that, that ilk. We want to prioritize, in my opinion, because it's the future, and we want to make sure we're getting those future ready projects here. Next is manufacturing. I will say that even though our state senator blasted us for providing a 15-year pilot to Royal Wine Company per our UTEP, the old administration decided not to change that, to reduce that from 15 years. So even though they've reduced the others, I think in large part to appease him, they left it there on purpose. Again, he criticized it, but it's still at 15 years for manufacturing. I'd like to see us maintain it, but I think we need to discuss that. Manufacturing is still a priority. Certainly, I think most people prefer that over warehouse distribution simply. Requires greater skills, usually more staying power. And I think in America, we want to continue to attract manufacturing here at home. So that's, the second piece, but basically I'm putting out, I'm suggesting that we keep it there, but that's for discussion. Housing, we have no real mention of that in our UTEP right now, and it's something, again, that you've been hearing me say for well over a couple of years now, that I think it should be a priority. I think it's a big opportunity for us to help the housing crisis, for us to do other good work, even if some other areas go through highs and lows, some other sectors we work in. And again, as Jeff and I heard a lot at the conference, New York State EDC conference this week, IDAs are doing it all over for the same reasons, because we need to address it. And there's often question of whether or not IDAs can or not, and it was resounding, the reinforcement that IDAs absolutely legally can and do support housing. So I'd like to put some parameters in the UTEP around that and make it a priority. And the last big item for me, and I think there could be some other things in here, but renewables. We just don't have, we approved incentives for the battery storage project. That was as a deviation because we only have we allude to I think a solar project in there, but we really aren't addressing renewables and the things we're facing now. And of course, we have experience here, you have experience in Montgomery of considering battery storage projects. In solar and wind, solar is something, I've had some meetings with some groups trying to encourage us to add it to incorporate it to our UTEP, and some suggestions as to how to approach it. So that's other stuff I could share. But in this meeting, I really want to go through the way I'm looking to approach it and talk about, and get some feedback on how we move forward. You want me to keep going here?
I might just say, do you have a comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at the high-tech projects, semiconductor. Don't we have advanced manufacturing? Some companies here.
We do.
Advanced manufacturing and advanced agriculture. We have that existing. Right?
We do. I just want to make sure we're prioritizing, or I feel that we should prioritize it with our incentives. So I think when we're clear on what are important priorities to us, then when we're actually drafting what are the number of years on a pilot or any other parameters around the incentives, then we know when we're talking about our top priorities or others that aren't as key. You have a follow?
You skipped over adaptive reuse.
Oh, I did, thank you. Jeez.
I just want to understand that a little bit.
I didn't know if that was on purpose, but before
It was not on purpose, actually.
Before, I noticed that, thank you.
Thanks.
But before we jump in there, I think you just indicated these top priorities don't necessarily tie to a particular recommendation for a term of schedule.
Not yet.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate.
I want to agree that I want us to come to a
Perfect.
consensus on what the priorities are.
Yeah.
And then figure out, all right, well, how aggressive do we need to be on this
Yeah.
versus another one?
On the renewables, before we leave that, I think in fairness, in 2019, particularly the battery storage was just in its infancy. So maybe that's not quite correct, but today it's hugely important. I attended one of the breakout sessions at the conference Bill's referred to this week, and it was noted that the goals in the state for 2030 and 2040 were nowhere close to having a statewide plan to meet those. And there's not really a backup plan if you phase the conventional stuff out and you don't have the new in place, that equals a few serious problems like an inconsistency of power and reduced reliability. So I think these are hugely important, so I'm glad you have them on the list, Bill.
Great.
You had said that the renewables, it's mentioned, but we don't really have it's mentioned in UTEP, you want to bring it a little bit stronger language?
Yeah, it's not really addressed properly, just kind of, mentions it, but there's no guidance, there's no schedule on a pilot or any of that,
That's what
so,
I'm saying.
yeah. I would like to find that.
In the,
That wording.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just looking for it. I don't know if it should be on page 6 or maybe it goes on to page 7.
in the same thing, it's similar to the same thing with the housing, and housing not mentioned at all.
No, I don't think housing is mentioned at all in here, yeah,
Mhm.
not even any indirectly.
I might just, this is a slightly out of context, but I think we should have it in our minds ongoing when we look at our name and possibly rebranding, when it basically incorporates industrial
Yeah,
development, doesn't say anything else.
Right.
It's not very inclusive of some of these things, especially
Absolutely.
energy and housing and
Sure.
so forth.
so page 6 of your packet, this is the UTEP, section A, real property taxes. And it starts to talk about, so it is, solar is included in here, and you see they have
Oh,
some
I
of
see
these.
it, yeah,
Right, so
under the
it's
15 year.
under the 15-year. But I want to kind of pull that out. I'd like us to address these different sectors a little more specifically.
And again, we heard this week at the conference that it's not one, it's not even two of these. You need the third component of battery, which is really energy storage. So when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you have a place to get your power
Correct.
by storage. It makes sense. I know not everybody is totally on board with that, but if it works, it makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Now, and I know you're just looking at this now, but is there anything that stands out to you that's missing? That you think is glaring, we should be focused on?
Good question.
And again, continue to consider that.
Maybe in light of that question, is there anything in our current UTEP that doesn't belong? Because that's more comprehensive when you look at medical and hospitals and healthcare professional office. I don't think we can say those are particularly unimportant.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure you're suggesting phase anything out, but
I'm not, but that's a really good point, that we should look and see what's either not applicable anymore or should be revised and updated based upon where that sector is now or whatever it might be.
in the 10-year where it says banking and financial, would you have an example of projects that would include those things? Is that a professional building maybe?
Yeah, I would interpret it as that mostly, banking and financial. Yeah, I would say it's a capital project for a company in those sectors, either bank or financial institution, yeah, I would say it's, but not a retail location, probably. Not sure how
That gets a little
It does. It
interesting.
does.
But there's different kinds of retail. You can have a mixed-use retail.
Yep.
Right, good one.
I mean, to the point of, if we're talking about housing, it could be like a real live work where you have retail below resi.
Mhm.
So how would you exclude the retail from that? I know retail's a very touchy subject, but sometimes the retail becomes a little bit more efficient because of the supportive housing above it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I worry about excluding retail altogether, but I think that's something we need to, is there any way that we could support any type of retail?
Yeah, see, I was gonna say, it's not that we're choosing to, it's that IDAs, are precluded from supporting certain types of retail,
Are there any retail types that can be supported, like if it's part of housing?
I have to research that. Let me see.
from my Montgomery days, I think the answer is yes. I'm not sure of all the parameters, but.
And also, I also think that, when as we're doing this, try to include everything, so we're not, we don't want to have to keep going back and
Definitely
changing this,
not.
right? And we also, to Giovanni's comments, that things are changing, and that's something that I wouldn't have thought would be built at one time, you know, and it really works, and we know it works, right? You know, a perfect example I've seen in other areas that it really works, where it's retail underneath and housing on top. You know, the housing market, or the single family home in the middle of development stuff sometimes is changing to where people are going to more to those types of.
Absolutely.
of,
It's what people
so-
want. Mixed use is really bad.
Oh, man.
Not
big
just in
deal.
our cities.
Mhm.
We've seen with Giovanni's company, some of, the, you know, what they've done. It's creating communities you maybe wouldn't have expected, you know, 10 years ago,
Correct.
even.
Mhm.
But no, I agree.
That's why I think what we're doing here tonight is very important, that we're starting, just starting to talk about all these
Yes.
items. I mean,
That's all I'm
I
looking to
think it's
do,
very-
is
very-
get this conversation
Exactly,
started.
well said.
important. So,
Jumping down to this, the other considerations, just because you're segueing there, the New York State Monitor. The monitor, it appears, will be appointed and in place soon. One of their stated areas of responsibility is, in power, I guess I'll say, is over the UTEP, where they're able to kind of rescind some changes you make to the UTEP if they don't agree with them. So, and we've had a lot of discussion as a board about this, and I'm trying to kind of thread the needle between not waiting to start this until the monitor comes, but not have it drafted and ready to be passed, and the monitor hasn't, been able to weigh in
and
on
then
it.
we're right back to square one.
Exactly. So I think that's why I'm no problem. There's research to be done here. It's going to take a little time. Plus, they need to get on board before we get near a final draft of it. So.
And for me anyways, and I'm sure the monitor is going to be very versed in IDAs, et cetera, because I would like to, as you're discussing, you hear people all the time, you can't do this, you can't, and yet, you guys have went to the conference, which is great to see what other IDAs are
absolutely.
doing and how they're affecting their communities, et cetera. So bring that to them, say, it's something we just didn't pull out of the air. I mean, they're doing it in other places. So I don't know if the state has some sort of, matrix of who's doing what, or who includes certain things, but I think that would be important to have.
That's actually was the note I made for one of my next steps is I've been collecting UTEPs from other IDAs that I'm really interested in. I didn't want to overdo it with sharing all that stuff with you guys right now, but I will. The way I want to present it to you next is, once I get your feedback on what the priorities are right, I'm going to go to those IDAs, UTEPs, and see what we could. We can rewrite it. We can. But I'd rather steal the concepts a little bit and again be able to present it and say, here's how this is done in Genesee. Could this fit for us? Do you see some different this, that, and the other? But a matrix is exactly what I was looking to do, was talk about some of these priorities and then talk about the UTEPs, the different IDAs, and come up with some ones that we can kind of model after.
Question?
The UTEP revision, is it all ideas in the county, in New York State, or just?
Absolutely. All New York State IDAs must revise their UTEP. I don't think there's a specific number of years, when they have to do it by every 3 years or something. I haven't seen that language, but that is definitely understood. We're supposed to review it periodically and revise it. Yeah.
Bill,
So everyone does it.
if it's not in the UTEP, does that mean that we can't act on it?
No, because anything that's not in the UTEP or something that we want to do something different for whatever reason, special conditions of the project, we can deviate from our UTIP. But when you deviate, there's some restriction with the monitor on deviating.
Oh, really?
I think it's been so long now since I've looked at that language, but I think we can't deviate. I think
Because of the monitor?
either without their approval or altogether we can't. So we have to really make this work for the next 2 years.
Well, the reason why I'm
to work for
asking,
us.
how does this impact our shovel-ready, potential shovel-ready projects? If it's not called out specifically.
I don't think it has to affect shovel ready, because shovel ready will, a lot of it can be done on the other side of the house, the OCFC, but it's not, shovel ready doesn't have to be driven by our UTEP, like governed by the UTEP.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, it's a different, this is all for our incentives that we offer and consider
Okay.
for applicants, yeah.
If
it's a
a
side issue.
shovel-ready leads to a project that comes back to us for abatements,
Yeah,
then I assume it would,
of course, then it's gotta fit,
but not at that step.
correct.
One thing I would say, getting back to your comment on retail, and I think these, even though the verbiage isn't real long on these schedules, they're quite inclusive, and I even see now, under the 10-year, the last sentence talks about qualifying tourism, which we know is very important in Orange County,
Retail and recreational, yeah.
and recreational facilities, but it doesn't really specify a particular retail. That seems pretty broad right there.
Good.
We'll certainly want to get appropriate legal review of this,
Exactly.
our final draft, and what we vote on.
Yeah, so I'll find out what the parameters are there. And let me go back in order here. Now the second section to relook at. I
Did you
mentioned.
do adaptive reuse then?
I
Okay.
don't think we did dive into it. You're right. We
Yeah.
never went back. I just handed
know we
out.
brought it up, and
I handed out that article from the record from when Town of Montgomery did their
Revision,
revision,
yeah.
right? And that was something else that, at the time, I probably wouldn't have thought of it until I, went through it with Montgomery with that. But that's really finding ways to incentivize projects that will reuse, old buildings, old properties. Maybe something like Camp LaGuardia, for example, somewhere to go in there and deal
Could
with
be
all
also malls.
that. Absolutely.
good point.
Malls are
Woo.
what they call gray fields now, and they're ripe for redevelopment.
What
Absolutely.
about office
It
buildings?
was funny you mentioned that, Bill, so because today, if anybody saw the record, I believe I still read the record.
Huh?
But it was.
They're still out there?
What's that?
Right?
Yeah.
The,
No, I do.
Remington, and
Yeah.
obviously it's not
Oh, I saw
our
that,
area, but
yeah.
they're completely shutting it down, and that was something obviously that, just, we're on subject, so, but.
Yeah.
Where's that located? I didn't get to that part.
It's Ulster, isn't it?
No, the
Remington?
Remington place, way upstate, it's like
Yeah.
Utica area.
Oh, Utica,
But they're
okay.
closing, it was in the paper today, they're closing, it's,
Wow.
Olean,
Oh, okay.
Olean or something like that, I mean, there's
Olean, right?
hundreds of workers.
Yeah.
It's finally completely shutting it down, so it's, it'd be devastating to the community, so,
Yeah.
but just reading
Sure.
about it, it all relates, right? Hopefully that doesn't happen in our area, but you never know,
There's
so.
quite a spectrum of possibilities on reuse, and
Mhm.
the two that I was involved in Montgomery were much older uses. The Borden Milk Condensery, which is being considered for kind of a tourism destination, or really, and maintaining the structure to a large degree from a historical standpoint, and also City Winery, the old woolen mill in Montgomery, which was basically not used for quite a few of the last years. It had minimal use
Mhm.
right up till it evolved, but it certainly was outdated.
I worry when I see words like qualifying tourism. What's the qualifying? What does that mean?
I mean, it's vague, right? I don't know.
I mean, does a convention center meet that requirement? I don't understand. Qualifying, it's subjective, right?
That's some of that language. Yeah.
Maybe we should take that word out. Do we need it?
I don't know.
If it
I'm gonna
doesn't
talk-
help.
That's a Sue question.
Yeah, again, a lot of
At this
these are
point-
getting into,
I'm just saying, if
Legal
somebody
review?
comes to us and says, hey, I want to do this big convention complex, is that considered qualifying tourism? I'm just using that as an
and
example.
I think that would be to me, just because.
I
don't have any knowledge of
We
anything,
absolutely
but-
want to support, so.
While we're picking on words, just before that, agency's discretion. I assume all of this is at our best judgment
Exactly.
and what's appropriate, so if that gives us more latitude, fine.
It's kind of like a catch-all,
Give it a try, right?
et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's good.
I like the direction.
Okay,
Me
great,
too.
great. Those are great points, like about malls and everything, that's excellent. And then my second section, relook at, I mentioned warehouse distribution, I just think that and hotels, we just need to talk about it. Do we, because, just to be clear, a 6-year pilot for a distribution center or 4 years for hotels, they did that so that no one would come to us. I mean, they're gonna go for a 45B before they come to the IBA for a 40-year pilot on it. And, it's been okay with the hotels in that they're getting a 45B, which they get as of right, and they come to us seeking sales tax, mostly, right? Some is mortgage recording tax. But I think we need to at least discuss that. And then-
Do you know, did we not want hotels or the decision makers back in 2019 to go to 4 years? Because we know they're kind of needed to complement some of the other
Jeff,
things.
those two changes were 100%, I'm not just saying this isn't propaganda, they were done to appease the state senator, who
Okay.
those were his two hot button issues.
Okay.
Didn't like warehouses, didn't like hotels, thinks everything's
Got
coming anyway. With hotels, we've seen it with the two projects we've considered and approved them both in the town of Wallkill, where we've had the county come out, the Economic Development Department, the Tourism Department. They're the ones speaking of the conference center. They did the feasibility study for that conference center done by an independent company, Johnson Consulting. And they told us they absolutely think we can sustain actually two conference centers. There's a real lack between New York City and Albany. And, but they said Orange County needs more hotels to support that, for to do that. And that's a major goal for us. We wanted to attract the conference center here for 10 years.
That's part of the qualifying tourism.
There you go, qualifying tourism. And just my last thing on the relook at is warehouse, hotels, and project scoring matrix. That was something else they developed, and I just think we need to look at that, whether, not everyone uses that. It's kind of, more rare, I see, from the other UTIPs I looked at, the scoring matrix. It was done as a tool to allow the board to prioritize what's, emphasize what the priorities are, and then, some quantitative analysis of, oh, this has this score based upon what its shortcomings are, its strengths are. I'm not confident that as is, that it fits exactly what our priorities would be and how we, would score a project, so to speak. So I think it either needs to be revised or completely removed. But that's something I want us to consider, and I want you to think about it.
My understanding is there's less of these scoring schedules in UTEPs across the state than there
Absolutely.
used to be, and when there's so much fluidity to some of these projects and what really is needed, it seems hard to enter it into a one-page scoring chart to make a
Right.
decision.
Absolutely.
But that's just my thought.
So that's just something else that I think needs to be looked at. And then in the Slack side, and then I'm done, we just discussed, but other considerations, the warehouse one is a typo on the bottom, I apologize.
So that shouldn't be there.
It should not be
Okay.
there. The first two, impending 485B opt-outs, again, the state senator sent a letter to all taxing jurisdictions in the region encouraging them to opt out of the 485B. Because he knows that's something I've frankly attacked him about, where, I've explained that he drives someone away from us, they're gonna go to get a 45B as of right, and they're not held to local labor, so they're gonna get all out, that's what he did with Medline. He chased them away from the Montgomery IDA, they went and got a 45B, and then they saved the rest of the money they would get with the rest of the pilot by using out of area, mostly out of state labor. So that was, I think he's trying to close that loophole. That's why he promised the unions that he was gonna provide a prevailing wage on all the 45B, which he could not do. He was never able to do that. He said the governor would look at it when he came back, but now he put a bill forward trying to modify 45B, which with all the calls I've made, it's not gonna happen. So he took to it himself, guerrilla warfare, and he's reached out to every taxing jurisdiction, encouraging them to opt out of the 45B. Now, the silver lining for us would be that they're looking, these companies depend upon those types of exemptions because of the cost of constructing in New York State. So I think it'll drive more companies to us. It's good for us in that we'll have more activity and local labor. We're gonna be held to that.
I think some of the concerns, we had a conversation when it first came up
Mhm.
regarding that some of the smaller businesses, 485B, seem to work out. It's easy application or whatever.
Absolutely.
We talked about having our application maybe streamlined or whatever, or have, if they don't have, a staff of attorneys like some of the
Yes.
larger corporations, that we can try to help them out and guide them through. And I think that would be a big help as well, as we'll see more
I
discussion.
think that's a really interesting approach,
We
absolutely.
discussed that, so.
And just for my clarity, there's no opt-outs available for school districts at various levels of municipalities now?
No, for 45B?
Yes.
See what you
No,
mean?
there is.
Yeah, they can
No,
opt out. How do you mean?
So I'm still trying to understand this impending 485B opt-outs.
Because the senator put the letter out, and there have been a couple, including Newburgh schools, who have
To-
opted out of it.
Encourage them to use it.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No, encouraging them to opt out, meaning, so the 45B is basically, in layman's terms, I call it half a pilot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It starts
yeah.
at
No,
50%,
I
right,
know
goes
what
to
it is,
5%. Okay.
so
But each taxing jurisdiction can opt out, like we
Yes.
have Monroe Woodbury.
Yeah, that's
schools.
what I
So
thought.
I'm not understanding, I apologize.
Yeah.
But Monroe Woodbury, they opted out for years, and it's been problematic with some projects over there, because it's not an option for them. So they have to go to the IDA if they're looking for any, either abatement on
Yeah.
property taxes, or, you know, any
Mhm.
other help there. So Newburgh already opted out, it was new as a result of this letter. Someone
Okay.
else did
Yeah.
too. Washingtonville, there's another district that did.
I think Marv was Ulster, but still,
Mhm.
they did.
Yeah, someone else in Orange County did, I'm pretty sure.
But they do have some properties in Orange County.
Yeah, yeah. So I just think we need to, I think it's relevant for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because understand that there's,
Okay.
like what Dean suggested, that's an appropriate response for,
Yeah.
hey, we have this going on, all right, well, maybe we should streamline it. And we do have and it's something we've had, I just looked at our old brochure that they used. We had a 45B equivalent that was really modeled
Yes.
as 45B.
Yes,
So that's, I think it's still a viable product for us, but I do want to.
I was misunderstanding, I thought you were saying there was some impending legislation.
No, just the pending
Yeah,
meaning, they can choose to opt
yeah,
out, that letter only
yeah.
came out a month and a half ago or
Yeah.
something, they can still be discussing it, voting on it, and opting to opt out themselves.
Yeah, okay.
But to your point, at some time they can opt back in at any time.
They can. They can. But he's, for his own reasons, again, his own politics, trying to close that loophole. So it's not an argument for us, because it's, and I'm often comparing to 45B, because as of right, they can go get it. So let's compare apples to apples here. So, but I know he's trying to close that loophole. That's why, again, he promised the unions he was gonna, get prevailing wage on it, he couldn't, so.
We don't have like, a jurisdiction can't opt out of the IDA. Once the IDA,
No.
they have it, and it'll be,
Yeah.
you can't say there, a company's gonna pay property without school. It's all.
Correct, absolutely.
But
And he's
I
tried
think
to
that's-
put bills forward to limit all those things, but he's not gonna have any luck with that. His colleagues don't agree with him.
So and what was the 45B equivalent? What was that? They had something or was
It was modeled after the same thing, where it starts at 50%, goes to 5% a year for 10 years, essentially. Yeah, it was just modeled after that, but you do it here, again, they hold the local labor, there's monitoring, there's oversight, we're reporting everything on that project.
Well, I like that, and I also like the fact that we have, and we've talked about over different projects where like some of the clawbacks as well. If they don't, I don't know how the 485B works or whatever, but if someone takes it, whatever, what types of clawbacks are there? We have clawbacks if they don't,
Exactly.
if they don't, finish what they're doing. I'm not 100%.
I don't believe there's any local labor
No.
Oh, not at all.
requirements.
Nope,
Does 45B also offer a benefit for sales tax and mortgage recording?
no, it's just property tax.
It's just
abatement,
property, so
essentially,
they don't get
on
that other,
construction
they don't
and
get any of
commercial.
those other benefits?
They don't.
Okay.
Yep, that's why, again, like a hotel, they've come to us on the sales tax piece. So, yeah, I think we just need to consider the fact that 45B may be less of an option for applicants out there, so it just needs to be consideration. And I already mentioned the situation with the monitor, we just have to be, well aware. I'm gonna double check on the deviation.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was looking at the Montgomery tax breaks.
Yes,
At the bottom, I see here that members resign because of frustration. Do they talk about what type of frustration? Is it from the senators? Frustration.
is that referring to Don Berger or
I
some
think it might be
RPM
a
type
link,
folks?
I think if you printed it, it might just be a link that you hit.
These are related stories, it looks like. Is it say more before,
Yeah.
is that what you're saying? More?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are other stories. Montgomery recently, they blame it on frustration.
It doesn't even say which board for sure, if that's something.
You just give this an example of what.
Exactly, yeah, because they went through it recently and it's local here, and Jeff was a part of it, so,
Right.
obviously. So I just wanted to share that.
I don't recall four that fall in that category.
Yeah, not you, right? Not Montgomery idea, I don't remember that,
No,
right?
and we had an older
two.
gentleman that felt it was time to allow someone else to take his place. And except for one, maybe, anyone I remember had different reasons and frustration.
Right. I'll just add this editorial. They also had at least one board member who didn't believe in the agency. He was an opponent. He was part of the residents group that opposes development. And I think the supervisor at the time was trying to do the right thing and all right, let's put a dissenting voice on there. But that gentleman, from my observation, was trying to dismantle the agency. And you can't do what we do here if you got, again, it's okay, we don't have to agree on everything, we don't have to vote unanimously, but we have to believe in what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And if you have someone that just does it and they're gonna work against you, I mean, why don't they should go to Washington, I mean, that's where they belong, they don't operate like that. That's not how we're trying to operate, we're trying to work together and trying to get things done, to attract businesses and create jobs, not doing it for our own benefit. So if you don't believe in it philosophically, it's just not gonna work. So I know there was at least one member where that was the case, and I venture to say maybe a second, but anyway, that's all, my editorial.
This looks good, Bill. So at
Okay.
some point, we'll look at these and drill in more detail.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I wanna make sure we agree, because I don't wanna do all this research and pull this stuff together, and you guys don't agree with this list. So I wanna make sure
This
I'm,
looks fine to me.
okay, great, and
Thank
now I'm
you. Thank
gonna
you.
provide a matrix with some examples.
No, the only thing I just wanted to, we talked about the reuse again
Yeah.
a little bit, but in some instances, like we saw down with the Green Thumb, those really, because there may be other state incentives that are to our advantage.
Yes.
I think maybe
Sure.
maybe, I don't know how we would do it, but if there's a way to build some of that in to really make the incentives, because if there is monies coming back, well, let's utilize that, and I don't know how that would all fit in there, but there was significant monies, and I think that should almost trigger a whole nother, I don't know how to say it, but what was it, Bill, that the state incentive for that location was
Where are we?
at Green Thumb it was like, because it was
Oh, yeah, so there was,
correctional
right, yeah,
facility.
because it was a correctional facility, exactly.
It was-
I mean, the end of the story was we put in $3.5 million and we got 3 back because of a grant
Correct.
from the state that was
Yeah.
tied to the fact that it was a prison,
So I don't know if we can identify any of those and really,
That's interesting.
really say, listen, this is, I mean, it's a whole nother, area that we
Yeah.
want. And again, getting back to the story I told about earlier, it was in our area, I mean, it was a bad example, but if there's anything out there like that could be reused, those should, in my opinion, those should really be, I think, of great stories all the way around.
I agree, and Warwick is the perfect example. I tell the story constantly, you've heard it a million times from me. That was slated to be closed in 2010. It could have been boarded up and overgrown weeds and everything. It could be like that for 25 years, easily. I mean, like so many other assets around, the country. But because supervisor, had vision, took action, because of our involvement and everything, look what it is now. It's a
got-
business tech park with all these different
It's
businesses.
got weed in it now.
Exactly, the weed is it.
So,
You have a show later tonight?
Say he's here all night.
He's here all week.
He's here all week.
just, you're better off just not laughing, I may say something else. So, and then the last item I wanted to bring, we had other conversations, some of the clawbacks, I don't know if it's necessary for tonight's meeting, but we had talked about some of those things where, again, we want to attract the local businesses and whatever, and we really haven't had an issue, but there was a couple little.
We've threatened
and
it a time or two.
And you've done a great job, and we've talked to them and getting those issues resolved where there wasn't payments made and there should have been, right? So,
Yep.
that's all.
So I'm glad you're bringing this up again, and Dr. Odock did at the last governance meeting asking about it. I had not planned to revise it, we did, it was part of our UTEP, the recapture policy, and we took it out and made it a standalone policy last year. So we do have that, I made that clear in the public that, it's a priority, that's why we did that. But to Dr. Odock's initial point, Sue says it covers it, that there's a lot of latitude there for the types of things that we're talking about, right? Not just, not creating the amount of jobs, but if they don't pay their subs, this, that. She's advised us that the latitude is in there. But I do wonder if we should spend a little time and make it even more clear and really have language that covers this, that, and the other, or, so that I could cite that and send it to someone that's not, I mean, I'm glad you're raising it, because I kind of was debating and I said, no, I don't think we're gonna address it right now.
Because also getting back to the local labor portion of it, I believe that and Giovanni knows, like, these contracts, if they know there's guarantees that there's things in it that they're gonna get paid,
Yeah.
I think that also that'll they'll look at these projects a little bit more aggressively. knowing that they have some reassurances, because as
Right.
we do know in the construction industry, a lot of times at the end of the projects, there's a lot of issues with non-payment, et cetera, so, but, and I think that would help the local labor, policy period.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think it makes sense. I think there should be some sort of, at least a conversation about that, because that it is real.
Yeah,
It's a real issue.
all right. You okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, I don't think that has to be the heaviest lift either, of the three. I think that's easy.
Sure.
But let's just make sure, again, satisfy those concerns in those of
I
all
just
the
want to
other
listen,
companies out there.
If it works, it works. If it doesn't,
It's worth the conversation for sure.
It definitely is, thank you. Great, okay, so I'll come back, and Jeff, we'll talk about this of how much we want to do in committee, how much we do with the
Sure.
full board,
Yeah.
we'll talk that up. But I'm gonna come back again with a matrix using some other examples of UTEPs around the state, and, based upon these, addressing these ones, bring it back, suggest some language, we'll start to really involve Sue with that piece. And again, we'll see what's going on with the monitor, and, like I intend to do with this monitor, assuming they're, a decent person you can work with, and I'm sure that's the case, because that's really what the IG's office was looking for. I'm gonna sit down with that person or people and understand, first of all, share everything with them and talk about these things. I, wanna be able to talk and understand how they would, just like I do with an applicant. I was explaining met with the town supervisor from New Windsor today, and he was asking me how many applications we reject, and I've been asked that by the media many times. I explained that, well, not many, but I don't like to put forward projects to you that I don't think are gonna get passed, frankly. I don't think it matches.
It's gotta get through the
Vetting,
vetting. Why
totally.
present it? Totally.
Exactly, so same idea, where I'm trying to do some of that in the front.
And I've also said sometimes that, I think you kind of have to wear a little bit of a different hat, where it may not be a project, and we've had this conversation, you may not like the product that they're producing or whatever. However, if they meet the guidelines of an IDA, et cetera, I think you have to kind of put that aside.
Right.
And say, just because you personally aren't like that product or whatever, that's not.
Marijuana is a good example, cannabis, I mean, it's a tremendous industry, I'm a very big believer, I used to say I was high on it, but I don't say it that way. I was big on it, it's a tough meeting here.
It's
Try to
so
leave it in
easy.
your car.
It's so easy, but.
Right, so, but I do believe in it, but I understand, we even have board members that don't love it, but they voted for it because they understand that it's a viable legal product and there's a huge, upside, it's a burgeoning industry, and we're trying to capitalize on that early on, and I just think we're seeing it, yeah, by the way, someone sent me, a friend will not be named, though legally, purchased some cannabis, and it says on the side of it, grown and harvested in Warwick.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so by GTI. So they've already seen that product out there apparently.
Wow.
Yeah, which is great to see. I'd love to see that made in Warwick on any product, whatever it might be, so made here in Orange County.
So we need to move on to local, or labor policy?
Yes. So, and nothing else on this, right? We'll keep
I think
talking about it.
that's a good
Okay.
start,
Okay,
good
great.
conversation.
Excellent.
Thank
Yeah,
you, everybody.
Rick. Okay, and local labor, it's the same thing, we did talk about in December. I don't have a lot of progress on it, because honestly, I was waiting for Jeff to get on board, because he with his experience in town of Montgomery, I addressed it again in, I think, December. We revised our policy long before us. We implemented a local labor policy in 2016. And we have an 85% threshold, that 85%, at least 85% of the workers, construction workers on an IDA project must be local. And that's, of course, the local 8 counties now, and basically in the mid-Hudson, including Delaware. Well, then they revised it a couple of years later, where they made it, rather than 85% of the whole project, it became 85% of every single subcontract, 85% of the concrete, 85% of the excavation, whatever it might be. And which in spirit, I would support that in spirit, had I not been doing this and know otherwise, that when it plays out, it's just been problematic, where all the applicants have challenges with it, the local labor monitors have all told us, the 3 that we've had have said this creates a problem and puts the applicant in the project in a tough spot to get it done. I mean, you're a developer, Giovanni, or you work for a developer, so could you understand that?
Oh, it's true, it's fact.
Okay.
There are just not enough trades. And you have to sometimes, unfortunately, have to go out of the region.
Reach out.
And, sometimes they'll come in and they'll hire local labor, but it's it's local qualified labor, right? You can always
Mhm.
find
Good
bodies,
point.
but they might not be able to tape, they might not be carpenters, they might not know how to work concrete. So it's an issue, it's a real issue right now. We have a shortage of tradesmen right now.
All right, so what Montgomery did was they I think they interpreted their policy, their policy was modeled after ours, but they interpreted it to create a little latitude there, a little leeway when it comes to that. Now, I've had a little trouble kind of pinpointing with their attorney how they did that. And their former attorney, actually I spoke with, and he said that that actually it was done in attorney-client privilege. It was an interpretation that he gave to, he advised, I suppose, the interpretation to clarify it, and therefore he couldn't share it with us. I was hoping that we have the former chairman here with us now, that we could find a way that we could at least get some guidance on it.
Yeah, why couldn't we get that? It's gotta be a public document, no?
That's what I was assuming.
Well, the document is public.
Yes.
And I honestly don't completely remember the proprietary advice
Yeah,
related to interpretation.
I was surprised to hear that, but
I recall we did change some wording, and I believe we reduced the restriction for 85% by contractor.
I'm not sure it's completely removed altogether. Do you think?
Okay.
All right, let me look.
I sure thought it was, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I think we need to look at that closely.
So, we've also talked about, so we're saying that 85%.
The green line will be borne by that.
Okay.
Of every trade.
I also think we've had a couple of times issue where, the contractor is from out of the area. Someone comes in, they deliver something, drop something off there. They sign in, right? So now they sign in, they drop something, they leave. In the meantime, these other guys are working 10-hour days.
Right.
So overall, it's not even what that person was there for, but I don't know if that's kind of where we're going with some of this stuff or whatever. It wasn't even, wasn't even close. The guy said, well, he doesn't really, or should they not have counted that person at the time, whatever, I don't know. But there was some of those issues too, where there was people, I thought anyway, I mean, they were on the project, but they
Yeah.
weren't working any hours, they were in and out
Right.
for whatever reason.
Right. I mean, that raises another issue that probably deserves to be looked at here with the local labor policy. Trying to think how I quote this, but is the interpretation of how we count those local laborers. Right now, the way Sue reads our local labor policy, there's no way to interpret. She doesn't feel that. I'm not going to go there right now. The question is whether or not we count it by man hours, man days, or, pardon the expression, person hours. And I really would like to make an argument towards looking at, again, for lack of a better term, man days. So how many people are on there? Because I use an example like Legoland, for example. They've had excavators on that site since 2019 or whatever it was, and they're still doing some things on there. They're constantly Boyce Excavating and Patillo and others that were there. So they were there for months and months, years we're talking about, all local. And then you have someone else come in that is doing, I used to say the example all the time, a carpet contract. Because they come in one day, they're doing all these carpets, and they've got 20 men and women doing that. That, to me, if we're counting it all together, there's so many man days or man hours built up locally with excavators and all this other stuff that, in the way it's written now, if that carpet contract has people, it's not 85% local, but they've got 9,000 other people that are local on it, they're disqualified. They don't meet the threshold. So, figuring it out how we, in Sue's recommendation, is that the language is written in a way where it's clear how we're tabulating, and it's not now, right? I've got local labor monitors that disagree with each other on how to interpret it. Where, our former one disagrees with our current one, but I think it's open to misinterpretation, and I don't think it's fair, frankly, for the projects that are following the spirit of the law, of the policy, and having mostly local people on there for, again, months, if not years on the project, and you have a couple people that are outside the area on one little subcontract, and they're out of compliance. And I think it goes against the spirit of the, and Dean knows, by the way, Gio, one second, that I'm trying to do it right. I want to make sure, I believe in the policy, and I want us to do it right. I'm trying to always find that perfect intersection of holding them to the spirit of it and being as local as possible, exploring every avenue, and our monitors really help with that, because when they say, oh, we couldn't find anyone local, did you try X, did you try Y, and okay, and they'll connect them with them, so we're doing all that. I want to do that while not completely slowing down or stopping a project as a result of this. So I'm trying to, that's why, again, as he knows, I'm involved in almost every conversation on these. I go on site meetings for this. I want to learn myself, and I want to make sure we get this right. But there are some areas where this still just isn't working for everyone, and I just think we need to analyze that. The biggest piece for me is that by contract, how we can just find a happy medium there. And then, since you raised it, I think that's something that we could use some input from Sue on, is how do we want to count it? How do we want to tabulate, and, because there are a few different ways to look at it.
But I also wouldn't want it to be that, okay, there's X amount of man hours, or if we do it that way, and they say, we have all these man hours, so there's contractors coming in, and, well, he doesn't have to worry about it, because we're already, again, in the meantime, there's so many local people that can do
Absolutely.
that.
I don't want to see that happen either.
So how do we, is it, I just wrote down, it's something to maybe talk about, like, is it a certain, like you had said, like maybe 20 people for carpooling or whatever, like, maybe it's a crew size, maybe if it's under 4 people or whatever, then, and if you're over the same, if you're, as long as you're over it and there's a something that's 4-person crew or something, it's difficult for them to add a person to that small crew. I don't know, maybe something like that, but.
Yeah, because if you have 3 out of 4 are local, that's not enough. 75%.
Good point, good point.
Yeah.
Doc?
Yeah.
That's a really interesting approach. Right
Yeah,
there. It's
I needed
something to look at.
some type of clarification. Yeah, about a couple of months ago, I got a phone call from a firm in Syracuse, asking me that they will, I have a consulting firm, Caddo Consulting, that they are required to get a minority, for the project they got, they are required to get a minority firm
Right.
to work with them. Now, how does that relate to IDA? Do we fall under that same situation?
We don't have any requirement with minority and women-owned businesses. It just affects some of our projects who've received state funding outside of our incentives. They receive some state incentives. They usually are held to MWBE, and I forget, is it 30%, 20%? I'm totally forgetting what that figure was.
Depends
30
on,
was.
yeah, it depends on the agency putting the project out, doctor, but it could go up to close to 30% on some state work, depending on the project and depending on where it is throughout the state. Some areas are higher, some areas are lower, and I guess they do a calculation maybe of percentage of minorities and women in those areas, or whatever, I'm not sure, but it depends on where it is.
So our projects has nothing to do with
No, not tied to our incentives at all.
No.
We do just have, like Lego Lane was an example, like it's significant state funding, so they had to, and they were concerned about it. They told the IDA right away, like, we may have to satisfy the MWBE over local, the local labor in some cases, because they can't satisfy it. They got $40 million from the state. They're gonna meet those requirements,
So, but there's also something that kind of goes back and forth where if they have to hire a contractor for a percentage of the project, right? Say it's like we said, 30%, right? Maybe it's 18% of MWBE as opposed to WMBE. But it's that contractor, right? But they can hire whoever they want underneath. Doesn't mean they have to hire. So there's other ways maybe that you can get around it where you say just hiring minorities or women as opposed to having a company come in that is a minority or a women owned. So, but
Yeah, 2 different things, right? One focuses on the owner, the other one focuses on the workers.
Yeah, good point,
Yeah.
good point.
That's a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to go down that road.
Yeah. gets involved. So more work to do there and,
Definitely. I'd like to start working with Sue on it and
good
you a little on the
discussion.
Montgomery piece
Yes,
if we could.
yes.
Bill, to your point though, I mean, if there is a conflict with like a state agency or another agency that's higher than us, I mean, that should be addressed in this labor policy, shouldn't it? I wonder if, you know, if we have a certain requirement and then, like you had mentioned Legoland, if they have state requirements that's in direct conflict with us, what do we do? Who wins?
That's a Sue question.
It is.
Also, it sounded like with Legoland, they would forfeit one of them,
Right,
Right.
but that doesn't seem
which could kill the
Completely.
project, right? If they're coming to us. and-
potentially,
If they're
sure.
coming for both, typically they need both.
Yeah,
Maybe that's why they struggled a little bit, Bill, with it. Maybe that was some of the issues maybe that's something we can talk about where it's like, those were the issues, that's why they had struggled with it and the percentages were where they were. It's something we didn't talk about.
Okay. Great feedback, Tony, thank you.
lot to consider there for sure.
Good stuff.
Anything else on that agenda item of local labor?
No. Not from-
Any other business we need to consider before we consider moving into executive session?
Yeah, exec session should have been below other business, so
Yeah, that's
thank
kind
you
of-
for jumping that.
What I'm thinking. And I might say before we go into executive session, unless someone has another thought, we don't plan to make any decisions during executive session, just discussion of personnel. And when executive session is complete, we'll come out and publicly close the meeting of this committee.
Great.
Would anyone care to make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel?
Anything.
By Doc Odoc, second to that motion,
I'll
good
second.
Giovanni. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. The committee will now move into executive session. Welcome back, everybody, to the governance committee meeting for the Orange County IDA. We are now out of executive session. Bill, would you just report on our motion to come out of executive
Yes,
session?
Giovanni Palladino made the motion, Dr. Odoc seconded it, and it was unanimous, all ayes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I can just confirm that we took no action during executive session, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn the committee meeting for today.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Giovanni, second by Doc Odoc. Any other discussion? All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All in favor? That meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't get was the minutes.